Okay. Well, you realize I didn't want to sound like I'm pretty hoarse. Can you hear me? Is it coming out all right? Okay. Well, I'm a South African by birth, and I'm a pretty mixed mongrel as far as that goes. One of my grandfather was a Swiss. Another grandmother was a Dutch. And the name Dry goes back to the so-called 1820 settlers, British stock. But I guess I can trace my family back many generations. And I was born in a little town in the village, small town in the Cape Province. And my father was a school teacher, doing of all things English. And I can't spell, so I don't know what's happened. But I think I'm the youngest of 4 sons. And the second son was talking to doing chemistry. And I think that was my downfall, because after that, the remaining boys all did chemistry. So I can blame the old schoolmaster for this business. Why the hell I did chemistry, I don't know. And I went to Rhodes University simply because that's where my father went, and all of us went there. So that's pretty corny, I guess. Okay, at university I did an MSc in electrochemistry. So it's miles away from catalysis. Then I won a scholarship to take me to the UK. And that's where I get into catalysis. But if you ask me why did I go to Bristol University, it's because the chap who advised me on this said, Bristol's a nice place. So I took his word for it. I really had no particular interest in catalysis. I went to Bristol. I was going to work under Garner, who was a big noise at Bristol. But soon after I got there, he retired. And I ended up with Frank Stone, who has been editing the Journal of Catalysis for donkey's years. I think that's probably why he's so well known. All right, that's how I got into catalysis. You can say I fell into it. After that, at that stage in Britain, there was a so-called one-way traffic of all the young people who graduated ended up in America. I didn't intend to end up in America, but I went to Amherst College and worked with Professor Beebe, and he was very keen on doing heats of chemisorption. Incidentally, at Bristol, I did catalysis with CO, carbon monoxide oxidation, nickel oxide, stuff like that. I haven't looked at that since. But that sort of put me in the game of catalysis. Now, all right, at Amherst, I was still in the field of surface science, if you wish. But of all odd things, old man Beebe was interested in calcium apatite for some peculiar reason, something to do with the teeth. And I did heats of chemisorption on apatite. Okay. After that, that was just a year. I had a good time touring the States and getting to know the world. Then I returned to South Africa. Okay, I'd met someone. You don't know about my family life, do you? Or what? My wife is Welsh, I'd met her at Bristol. She was a dentist. So I went back to Britain, married Margaret, and we returned to South Africa, and I got offered a job at Sasol. Now comes the complications. You know, Sasol, South Africa is a small country. You think of it there. At that stage of the game, about 3 million whites. So, and the blacks were relatively unsophisticated, so all the technical people were whites essentially at that stage of the game. It's changed a lot now, obviously. And lo and behold, who's my first boss? My brother. That's how it happens. Small world. That could be pretty awkward. And okay, that was in the late 50s, when Sasol was only a couple of years old. And they were really struggling then, and they thought they better do catalysis. And I understood that one of the American advisors had told the Sasol people, stay away from catalysis, it's a dark hole from which you'll never climb out. And they chose to ignore this, so that I was appointed to start up catalysis research at Sasol. So I was just thrown into the pit there, and I had to learn about Fischer-Tropsch. Slowly we built up the lab and measured all kinds of things in catalysis and got a feel for what was going on. A lot of our early work was really just sorting out the promoter contents of our iron catalyst. Okay, but I don't really, we just got stuck on catalysis there for forever.
Who was the American advisor that advised?
Oh, I forget the chap's name. He just said stay away from catalysis.
How did Frank Stone act as a research advisor? Close interaction?
Frank, no, I lost all contact with Frank. I've seen him occasionally, but on technical scale, there was no connection again.
But when you were there as a graduate student?
Yes.
Was there close interaction? Or?
Oh, with Frank, sure. I mean, it was a pretty small lab, really. He had about 4 or 5 students only. We saw him every day. Is this what you're getting at? Yeah, sure. Frank's a very quiet chap. Do you know him?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, we called him Uncle, you must know. He's retiring next year. But with Frank, I've had, on the technical scale, very little connection since.
And Professor Beebe, how was he to work with?
Oh, very nice old chap. I really enjoyed that year at Amherst. As I say, at that stage of the game, he was doing odd things.
I think he had a child that was a dentist.
Sorry?
I think one of his children became a dentist. So
Dentist?
yes, so he became interested.
I knew one who was a doctor.
Okay, maybe it was.
Medical.
Yes.
That was the second eldest I seem to remember. I think the eldest son was a teacher. But I forget. But I definitely know the second son was a medical chap.
Now, how did he handle interactions with people who did research with him?
Who, Beebe?
Yes.
Gosh, what do you mean? I don't recall.
Well, did he come around every day or let you?
Oh no, he left us pretty well much to ourselves. We just potted around. It was really a very peculiar year. Doing heats of chemisorption on apatite. I don't even remember what we chemisolved. Got a publication out of it.
Now, who are some of the people that you've interacted with in Fischer-Tropsch catalysis?
Okay, let's get back to Sassel.
Yes.
There, for many years, Professor Pichler was Sassel's consultant on Fischer-Tropsch for pretty obvious reasons. He had worked with Fischer, after all. And Pichler used to come out twice a year. And it was rather a peculiar setup. We used to read all our reports and then summarize them and report back to the directors on what we had done in the last 6 months. And we used to find this rather amusing after a while, because I think old Pichler learned more from us than we learned from him, quite frankly. It's not surprising, because even though Pichler, really, I was given credit for this, you know, it's often the Fischer-Tropsch process has got that name, but one gathers that Tropsch didn't have all that much to do with it. That he was an organic chemist, I gather, who sort of disappeared from the scene early on, but the name stuck. And I know old Pichler was always not bitter about it, but he always made a point of telling us that he had a lot to do with the iron catalyst, particularly the application of higher pressure to iron catalyst was Pichler's contribution. And in fact, when Pichler turned 60, I was asked to contribute to one of the articles, and I made a point there that I'm trying to say that Pichler's contribution was the use of iron at higher pressures, and sort of made the comment, therefore it should really have been called the Fischer-Pichler process. And old man Pichler loved me after that. He was very pleased that it's been publicly written on paper. Okay, then after a while, of course, he stopped coming. He was getting old, and after that we didn't use consultants again. One of Pichler's students is Hans Schultz, not of Schultz-Flory, incidentally. A lot of people are embarrassed Hans. They asked him if he's the Schultz or Schultz-Flory, but he wasn't. With Hans, we have a lot of contact still, but it's more informal. It's not on a formal consultant basis.
Was Pichler very outgoing, or? How would you describe
he
him
was
as a person?
I guess a pretty normal, thorough doer German type. He's a nice chap. We got on well with him. But he was very, not pedantic, but he didn't joke around, let's put it that way. He was a very serious gentleman. In fact, they call there's a Pichler Street in Sasselberg, named after him. He was very pleased about that as well, even though it's put out in the bush, there's not much there. And, well, gosh, I'm running out. What do I do here? No, just about told you anything.
Well, the way that you ended up working on Fischer-Tropsch, this had been decided before you started working there, or were you involved with it?
No, well, when I arrived there, of course, the catalyst was really just a black box. No one knew a damn thing about it. And I just started a small lab and a couple of assistants, and we started measuring surface areas and chemisorptions, the kind of thing that Emmett had been doing at that stage of the game. And from that, slowly my responsibilities grew into, we had big pilot plant facilities, and we still do. And I say, eventually, the thing just grew, and I became in charge not only of the so-called basic catalysis research, but of applied catalysis research. Then we started looking downstream of the reactors, which involves a lot of typical hydrofining operations, but bear in mind that the Fischer-Tropsch liquids are different from normal crude petroleum feedstocks. So they need investigations. Because of this tremendous spectrum of products, we had to do lots of things. We had to oligomerize the olefins, we had to clean up the, say, the gasoline cut before you can send it to a typical platformer operation. Remember, there are a lot of oxygenates in Fischer-Tropsch products, which the normal petroleum don't have. And diesel had to be hydro-treated, even though there's no sulfur or nitrogen in our diesel. It is highly olefinic. So the olefins have to be removed. But what I'm getting at is we didn't only do catalysis in Fischer-Tropsch. We do and still do a lot of work on the workup of the products. Because they're unique, we had to do this ourselves. And of course, on the whole, that's made the whole effort there very interesting. At that stage of the game, there had been interest, as you know, in the States itself on Fischer-Tropsch. But by the mid-50s, things had petered out. They had, after all, discovered the massive oil fields in Saudi Arabia. But at that stage, our plant was already built. We couldn't backtrack, so we just had to make this boom process work. It was completely uneconomical for quite a few years. But eventually we found our feet and got the thing to work, and really just eked along for years. And then, of course, when the oil crisis came in the early 70s, then we really shot ahead and built new plants. Having sweated blood in previous years, we knew what to do. And then, only then really, Sasol became an economic proposition. The firm became privatized, the government sold all its shares. It never was a government department, it was simply the government held the shares. And, then the government sold the shares, and we became fully privatized. And we just hit it lucky, I guess, that the oil price was high, and the rand in those days was worth something, unlike it's now. So we had the gold price was also high, so we had lots of money. And that combination of the high oil price and the strong rand, that's our monetary unit, we could build big plants and very quickly recover the capital for those plants. So that right now Sasol can survive low oil prices because our capital is essentially paid off. But now I'm giving you spiel about Sasol, not about me.
How were you able to publish? Was this a struggle, or were they eager to get the publicity?
I tell you, that first big effort of mine, well, I had published quite a bit, small, but in 81, I think, there was a new series of things, and
Anderson and
Anderson
Boudard.
and Boudoir, yes. So I published a chapter in that. I know for a fact that right now I'd never be able to publish that again, because at that stage of the game, Sassel wasn't very strict about what was published, because no one seemed to be interested in Fischer-Tropsch. But for many years after that, even I wasn't even allowed to repeat things I said in there. So they could sort of tell me, well, you know, if you publish that again, they might believe it next time round. This kind of thing. Well, I don't think, I didn't give away too many secrets, but I do know that they wouldn't allow me to publish again what I did then. Like, as time goes on, my publications seem to contain less and less. That's because the Sassel's editorial editing efforts are becoming more strict.
Well, you obviously are good at industrial research, but you're also academic. Why did you decide to go back and go into industry rather than try an academic career?
Funny question. I'm thinking of doing that in reverse now. I'm next year I'll be 60. When I retire, it depends. I could go early next year or hang on a few more years, but in fact, there is an opportunity, I've been offered an opportunity to do a bit of lecturing. Whether I'll really do that, I don't know. It'll be in Cape Town, which is a beautiful city. You know. I've already got a house there, so there's a great incentive to go down and live in the Cape. But I don't really consider myself an academic. The Fischer-Tropsch process is so interesting, one starts digging around in semi-academic, but quite frankly I don't have much time for mechanisms, because in my opinion the mechanisms have never proved anything. I'm just giving you off the top of my head.
Why do you think that's the case?
Sorry, I've never come across an instance where understanding the mechanism has led anyone to making a better process. And the academics seem to spend one hell of a lot of time fighting about the mechanism. In the meantime, we've got to try to make a profit. This frequently happens, you know. You can so many mechanisms. Take the Fischer-Tropsch. There's been a circular argument. You go back to the days when the carbide theory was a fichler. And then there was the oxygen intermediate from Everett and Anderson and company. That was thrown out. Now we're back to the carbide theory. But all of that, you can manipulate, those mechanisms can all explain virtually the product's selectivity. You can twist the things and say, well, if I want more of this, this is what I should do. And the mechanism doesn't really uniquely tell you how you should reformulate the catalyst, because so I'm not quite sure what the mechanism helps you. I've got a bit of a thing about mechanisms, because people seem to spend a lot of time arguing about them. And then if you say, all right, now let's settle, this is the mechanism, what the hell do we do with it? There's no very good answer comes out. It's a great academic exercise. But I think I'm deliberately exaggerating the thing. But there's an awful lot of time spent, fruitless time spent on trying to sort out mechanisms. And I'm not always clear to what end this great argument's about. Does it resolve? Take the ammonia process. Have they sorted out the mechanism? I'm not sure. But they've been making money out of ammonia synthesis since 1900, early 1900s. So still using the same old catalyst. It's amazing.
And very similar to the Fischer-Tropsch.
And it's not very different. Yeah.
What is it that guides you in doing research in Fischer-Tropsch and in general, not specifics, if you don't follow mechanism?
Well, you know, just sorting out the parameters that really control selectivity is of major importance to the industry. In our concept, methane is an unwanted product. So shifting the selectivity towards the heavier end has been an ongoing objective. In fact, we've managed to, I think we kicked off around about 15% methane when we started at Sassel. Nowadays it's around about 7. That doesn't sound much, but it makes a massive difference to the profitability. Because methane, you have to reform, as we call it, methane reforming, where you have to, with oxygen, well, over a nickel catalyst high temperature, it's methane reforming, don't confuse it with platforming. And that's a very inefficient process. So the less methane you make, the more efficient the overall process. Even today we are flaring methane, we shouldn't be doing, but the methane reformers just don't have the capacity. What I'm getting at is, below the mechanism, we've been all these years trying to improve the selectivity. And that we've essentially done with process conditions. Gas compositions, promoter formulations, tightening up our knowledge there. So even though we don't always know exactly why things work, we at least know what works. And in the end, I guess, that's important. When you can always explain the effect of a promoter, let's say potassium. It's the magic promoter of Fischer-Tropsch. You can spend an awful lot of time explaining it, why it works, but the point is it works and we know exactly how much to put in and how it interacts with other things, and in the end that's what's important. Cause and effect. With cause and effect you can get an awful long way of improving the performance.
But most academics don't teach students in this direction, and they apparently don't learn it very well themselves. And people who do, like you, are pretty unique. Is it personality, or was it just an interest? Or?
I don't know, there's just a lot of pressure. Remember, that was the wonderful part about working for Sasol, that we were the only plant in the world doing this crazy thing. There was no one to go and consult. You had to solve your own problems, and that made the work very interesting. If you came up with an idea and you plugged it out and tried it out in the pilot plant and it really worked, and you talked management into trying it in the commercial plant, and if it worked there, it was really very satisfying way of doing things. And we had plenty of flops too, don't worry. But on the whole, we have made progress, and it's very satisfying to see that work.
Why do you think you've been so successful and other countries
I don't
have
think
not?
Why has South Africa been so successful?
Well, in developing synfuels versus other countries.
Well, this is a bit of an odd story about why Sasol went into synfuels. After the Second World War, the conception was that the oil was running out in the world, and South Africa had no oil reserves whatsoever, but we had plenty of very cheap coal, simply because the coal was in very thick seams, and we could mechanically mine the coal very easily. So we had very cheap coal, and Fischer-Tropsch was seen as a source of of oil. But as I say, then we built the plant, and halfway through, the Middle East oil was discovered. But I've told you that already. It's a mistake that the country made, which turned out good. And of course, later on, it became a bit of a political thing. When the '73 oil crisis came, there were boycotts. I don't want to be involved in politics, but then we really had to. There was a concern that the economy could be very badly injured if we didn't have a local supply of oil. And there it was politics. Originally it was misjudged economics. In the end it became political, but if you look at it right now, it's turned out well. The plant is thriving. But we are moving away from fuels. We're going much more towards chemicals now.
And where will the fuels come from then?
Well, sorry, I
The
don't
same
think
as-
we'll eliminate fuels, but if you take the old Sasol 1 plant,
Okay.
which used to be a mixture of fuels and chemicals, the old reactors, they've been operating for 35 years, and the scale of those reactors are really not economic anymore. We're going to shut down the old circulating fluidized bed reactors and expand on the wax production, which is 3 times the price of fuel. I mean, why make gasoline if you could make wax? And of course, ethylene and propylene. Take the Secunda, the Sasol 2 and 3 plants. If you look at the Fischer-Tropsch spectrum, the major single compound is propylene in terms of mass. And what we were doing all these years was converting the propylene into gasoline. Now that's crazy economics, but we didn't really have much of an alternative market for it. But only a couple of months ago, a new polypropylene plant came on stream. So we've taken the propylene out and making polypropylene, which is much better business. So in that sense, we have moved into the chemical business rather than the fuel business. I mean, the overall production is the same, it's just that the productivity, it's,
You're
we're
redistributing.
making more money. If that's the bottom line, we're making more money. Ethylene we've been, of course, extracting out of Fischer-Tropsch gas for many years. That has always been very economical. Okay, well, I'm running out of things to say.
Well, to go back to Pichler, did he ever reminisce with you about his early work on Fischer-Tropsch back in Germany?
Oh, yes, but now it's difficult to remember the detail, and I told you about him being dissatisfied that he was never received all the credit he should have for the development of the iron process. You know, he was sort of forcibly removed from Germany to America. I think he was just carted over here, and he had to do his work here.
He was with HRI at one time, isn't it?
That's right. He enjoyed his work there. He told me, in fact, I think one of his daughters is still in this country. She went to Hollyoak, I think. No, I think his memories of the States were he was very pleased about that. But then he went back to Karlsruhe and the contact with us.
Did he ever describe working on this during the war, or?
No, I don't recall. Remember, I was pretty young when Pichler was with us, and we weren't really on our contact was more on the technical side. He might have reminisced with the older people at Sassel, but not with myself. So it's difficult to, I don't recall anything I can specifically say.
Who are some of the most impressive people you've encountered in your work in catalysis?
Oh, I don't know. It's difficult. I had old Bob Anderson was a nice old chap, and I had a lot to do with him, of course, because he was one of the old Fischer-Tropsch people, and I always enjoyed meeting him and chatting with him.
Did he visit South Africa often?
Yes, he was there once, many years back. But most of the time, my contact with him has been when he was in Canada, just meeting him at the odd conference. Yes, he was one of the old brigade. Of course, there's Kelvil too, the slurry man, but we didn't have much to do with him. Kelvil, he had a thing about slurry, and I'm not sure if he didn't oversell this thing, because you might be aware that very few people, well, no one to my knowledge, has been able to reproduce the claims he made for slurry bed reactor. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting he pulled any fast tricks, but something was fishy there. Maybe his students didn't report properly. But with Kelvil, we didn't have much to do. I saw him once or twice in Berlin, and we invited him out to Sassel once, and that's all. I believe he's still alive, but he's a very ill man, I believe. I don't think he's active anymore at all. But Pichler was the man we really dealt with. I don't think Pichler got on with Kelvil. Kelvil is a very outgoing, big talking chap. I don't mean that in a nasty way, whereas Pichler was a very conservative, much more Germanic, and those two didn't get on. In fact, I remember Pichler telling me, don't believe things Kelvil tells you. That could have been a
bit of German competition.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Now, you said that he would get the data reports and things technical people wrote, and then study them back in Germany. And
yeah, we would send him all our reports, and then he would come and review the plant's performance and what research had been up to. and then sort of droned his way through for 2 hours. Everyone fell asleep right at first. And I don't mean that in a nasty way, it's just that it became a bit pointless after a while, the consultancy, because, I mean, obviously we were gathering our own information and hopefully rapidly, starting to understand the interaction of the process, not the mechanism, just how the process reacted and interacted with process conditions. And, well, that, as I say, that was the interesting part of it. We had to get to know the process. We had very extensive pilot plant facilities and did a lot of work on process chemistry.
Were you given lots of freedom at that time to choose the direction?
Sure, and because no one knew any better. I mean, I was supposed to be the catalyst expert for what that was worth. So we pretty well did what we pleased. Obviously, it was obvious what one had to do because you knew what the problem in the plant was. So the direction of your effort was clear cut. There was no need to argue about it. You just had to go and sort things out. You know, it's crazy. A simple thing, like right in the beginning, we imported iron ore from the States, so-called Ellenwood ore. Now it became pretty obvious that this was crazy. Why import iron oxide all the way from the States to put in a synthol reactor, and only lasted a couple of weeks there. At that stage the runs were pretty short. And just 4 miles away from us there's a great big steelworks which has a massive amount of mill scale as a byproduct, as a reject product. So that was one of our earlier projects, was to make a catalyst from mill scale, and that's really where we started learning the hard way what the real role of the promoters were, because we simply got a formula from Kellogg Company, put in so much potassium oxide. And we didn't realize that potassium oxide would obviously interact with the silica. And I don't think Kellogg realized that the silica level was as important as the potassium oxide level. And when we started fooling around with different oxides, we cottoned onto that pretty quickly, that it's not just the potassium level, but the way it interacts with other components in the feedstock, in the raw material that is. Anyway, one of our first successes really was making a good catalyst from normal mill scale, which we got from a place around the corner instead of importing it all the way from America. In the same way, the fixed bed catalyst had been imported from Ruhrchemie. Now that's a precipitated iron catalyst and much more expensive, and after a while we simply said, what the hell, let's make our own catalyst. And Ruhrchemie agreed that we could go ahead and make our own catalyst. So we simply put up our own plant and started producing precipitated iron catalyst. And that too was very interesting too. Of course we had some, Ruhrchemie did agree to at least tell us how they did it, but in the meantime, over the years we've hopefully improved the catalyst and added a few tricks and improved the activity, improved the life, shifted the selectivity. Once you've got your own catalyst plant, obviously you can do these things. You can reformulate the catalyst, test it out in the pilot plant. If it works, you put it in the big plant. So I come back to this whole thing. We were on our own, and we had a whale of a time developing new catalysts, because there was no one else to help us. So we went ahead and did these crazy things and enjoyed it. And it worked out, I think. I don't pretend that someone else would have done a better job, quite possibly. We don't know. But we were there on our own.
But many people in industry seem to lose their enthusiasm after a while. You haven't done that.
Well, not yet, because the challenge has always been there.
Have you spent more time on research or administration as you went through your career?
Well,
did that change?
I'm a lousy administrator, I think. I'm still basically, I like to stay with the technicalities. Although I've got about 100 people in all reporting to me, including operating staff, I really much prefer the technical stuff. Have regular discussions. It's the technical side that I'm interested in. And in that sense, I'm probably a lousy manager, but hopefully I'm a reasonable technician. But I enjoyed it because, as I say, it's not just been the various aspects of Fischer-Tropsch. I emphasized early on that all the product workup, the catalytic workup, has also been, we put a lot of work into that. Also looking for better catalysts and better process conditions. And something quite different, which no one probably knows about, is that we have a great water problem in the Fischer-Tropsch process. You know, the gasification process makes a filthy stream of water, and the Fischer-Tropsch water itself is, although fairly clean, has got a high acid content in it. And this big new plant that we have is right inland, sitting on the source of the Fowle River, which is the major river for industrial and domestic purposes. So we dare not contaminate the river. So we really have to be a zero effluent water plant, zero water, what have I called this? No water effluent from the plant. And even though that's got nothing to do with Fischer-Tropsch, somehow those people report to me as well. And so that what I'm getting at is the interests are very wide. You don't get time to get involved. There are too many damn problems. The water problem is still a bit of a pain. But we seem to live with it. We just keep the balance, just. But that's not catalytic at all. It's all biological. I don't know much about it, but it's been a great challenge just to control the water effluent problem at Sasol.
Well, the Germans seem more philosophical bent that you have rather than the training you would have gotten with Stone. This was, but was that the German influence in building the industry in South Africa, or?
I'm not quite with you. How do you mean the German?
Well, they seem more to be interested in processing and engineering than in understanding mechanism. If you go back through the years,
yes.
Their industry has.
Yeah, but I suppose I'm not quite sure where you're getting at. But the Fischer-Tropsch, I guess Germany was also under pressure at one stage, simply to get synthetic fuels, especially during the war years. I think quite a big proportion came not from Fischer-Tropsch but from direct coal liquefaction. And then, of course, as soon as the war was finished, there was no interest in Fischer-Tropsch, not from the German side, because the oil was plentiful again.
Well, I guess I'm saying more the interest in developing the process and understanding it versus understanding the mechanism and physical science.
Isn't that normal, though? I mean, don't all industries start out that way? That you first get the damn thing to work, and then later on it becomes almost a luxury to try and say, what the hell are we doing now? Let's try and understand the process. But I repeat, I'm not particularly impressed with that argument that thinking that you've got a mechanism hasn't convinced me that is the way to... I know people don't like me saying this. I'm probably wrong. But no one's particularly shown me how understanding the mechanism leads to a better process. I don't want to ride that hobby. It's a bit of a...
Well, had you been to England before you went there to go to school?
No, that's my first. Spent 3 years in Britain, and that's the first time I went there. But I was about 25 when I went there.
And what was your impressions?
Well, it was soon after the war. Things were pretty, well, I guess I grew up in the wartime, as it were, so I was used to, I didn't have many luxuries. We were all poor, put it that way. And it struck me that Britain was pretty much the same in the circle that I moved. They'd only just come off rationing in Britain. Pint of beer cost 1 and 2pence, that's what I recall. That was very cheap, especially now it costs £1.
And had the university been damaged during the war, or was it?
Yes, in fact, old Churchill was the Chancellor of Bristol University, and the so-called Senate House had one bomb, and the old old man Churchill saw this damage and says, don't touch it. And apparently, for 20 years, they didn't repair that place because old man Churchill has said, leave it as it is, it's a reminder of whatever. Which is interesting.
Did Stone have a lot of equipment then, or was he doing it on very...
It was very elementary, you know. It was, well, you had a vacuum pump, you had to go to the glass blower to get the diffusion pump made. And the blast blower in those days were king. You had to go and sit in the blooming glass blower's office for 3 days in a row, and then he might look at you and say, well, what do you want? And it's amazing. We were told to do that. Said, just go and sit in the glass blower's place. And the glass blowers loved it. For 3 days you sit and talk to the glass blower. Then he would say, all right, now what do you want? But equipment-wise, very elementary.
How do you see graduate education changing over the years that you've observed it?
Well, I guess the big change has been the computers. I've only just recently, last couple of years, decided now if I don't get computer literate now, I'm going to die ignorant. So I'm doing little programs and elementary things on computers. It's very nice. I would have loved to be a younger man. I think I love figuring things out with numbers and calculations. But when computers didn't exist when I graduated, well, it must be the same with you. Yes. That's something I miss, I think. I would have loved to have been just, say, 10 years later.
How did you decide to work with Stone?
Well, I told you I was at Rhodes University and I got a scholarship to go to the UK, and we went through the list of universities, and this was Professor Gleriel, who was actually an electrochemist, and he later turned physicist. His wife had an associate with Bristol, and his wife told me that Bristol was a great place. Well, that's how I got into catalysis. So I got into chemistry because my brother took chemistry. I got into catalysis because someone told me Bristol was a nice place. Well, that's not a very great reason, is it?
Dowden was an alumnus of there. Did you ever...
Dowden?
Uh-huh.
Yes. He was in the same laboratory a couple of years earlier. And in fact, he also went to Amherst College.
Yes.
I just happened to know that we at that stage, we sort of followed the same route. I met him a couple of years after that. And of course, he's long retired. I'm not even sure if he's alive anymore.
No.
Is he? Have you met him recently?
Well, a year or two ago.
No.
Or three.
But he's no longer, he's retired, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
But your time there didn't overlap. He had
No, he had left Bristol when I got there, and I think he was already at ICI at that stage.
How would you describe graduate research in England? Formal, informal?
Difficult to judge. I didn't really know any different. All I knew is that if you wanted a job in the States and you were a British PhD, there was no problem. But I don't think it particularly reflects on the quality of the British PhDs. I think there was such a tremendous opportunity in the States. They call it the brain drain. I don't think anyone went. I don't think you had to be particularly brainy. It was a one-way traffic for an awful lot of people in Britain.
How did you choose to go with BB?
Once again, there was a connection with Stone. Stone knew BB had written and asked whether there was anyone willing to come to Amherst, and I volunteered. Young man, you know, I'd come from South Africa. It was great going to Europe, and I thought, well, go and see America while you're at it. And did that.
Did you get to know Emmett?
Not much. I met him a few times. Of course, I was still pretty young, and Emmett was a very big wig. And, I met him first time in Chicago at a conference while I was at Amherst. But that was just bowing down to a great man. Lucky to shake his hand, and that was it. And then, when I met Emmett many years later on, he was already a very old chap.
But he usually liked to talk to anyone about
oh yes,
any area.
He was very friendly. So.
worked in.
But I really didn't have any great discussions with him.
How would you describe Bob Anderson?
Nice old chap. How do you mean?
As a person, how he interacted with people?
No, I like Bob. He really was a nice old chap. And his knowledge, he always used to say, you know, these young chaps know nothing about Fischer-Tropsch, because there's a world of difference between the real hard world of Fischer-Tropsch in the industry and Fischer-Tropsch in the lab. And Bob realized that. He had been, in his day in Bureau of Mines, even though it wasn't big reactors, at least they'd worked on pilot plant scale reactors. And he appreciated the vast difference between let's say, the real world of Fischer-Tropsch and the academic side of things. And I know we often used to talk about that. He said, well, these young chaps know nothing. But I think that happens to all of us when we get old. The young people are always stupid.
Well, what's been the most satisfying thing you've accomplished in research?
Research? Well, I guess seeing the catalyst actually going into production. And very recently, well, this was obviously a team effort. We developed what we call the fixed fluidized bed reactor, which is a bit of a misnomer. But instead of this very complicated circulating fluidized bed reactor, we've got in place now a very elementary fluidized bed reactor, which is much cheaper to build, cheaper to operate, and that's been it's really been almost a show that we in research tackled, decided to go ahead with and develop together with Badger. That we say it wasn't all our business. But that was very satisfying to see eventually, after 10 years of fiddling from coal models to demo units, to actually see the reactor running now. But I come back, that was the nice part about Sasol. You had to do that kind of thing. If you were in the petroleum industry in South Africa, and you had a problem or you wanted a new reactor, you simply went to the mother company and said, you've got this problem or you want to buy this new reactor. Because we were on our own, we had to do these things ourselves. In that sense, it's been very satisfying to see it all happen.
So you became an engineer by necessity and on the job?
I don't know what I call myself these days. I was originally a chemist, but I guess I'm just a catalyst scientist, if you wish, process scientist. Okay, how are we running out of time now? Oh, I've had enough anyway.